I hope everybody enjoyed the session so far as much as I did. Thank you, Jeff, for bringing us all together to talk about these important issues.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Yeah, and sticking. And it looks like a full house, which is fantastic. Great venue, too. So I kind of want to pick up on some of the key themes from earlier today. And I've got a lot of notes, which informed a lot of questions. But I want to go back to what was September of 2021. And I was summoned to Jeff's office as the president and chief operating officer.
I don't summon.
Well, you invited me to come over,
Yeah.
and it's like the kind of invitation you don't refuse.
Yeah,
you know,
that's nice.
And I think you asked me, I had just accepted the role as president and chief operating officer of a trade association, and you pretty much asked me, what the hell are you doing? And, I explained it, and you were like, okay, cool. And then you said something that I really struggled with at the time, and I ended up having to write you 24 hours later. I don't know if you remember this.
I do remember this.
Where, he had said to me, look, CTV is the last great frontier for the open web and for the future of our business. And, I pondered that, and I'm like, well, he's a really smart guy. There's something to it, but I finally had to, really, it was eating a little bit of crow to write you a note and say, what the hell did you mean by that? And now here we are, 2.5 years later, and it's very clear where the puck has gone. And so you were a very early proponent of this, and you saw the opportunity in the lens of a marketplace dynamic that didn't exist in other channels. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, well, so there's a number of dynamics. The first is that, perhaps most obvious, there is no company that has a stronghold.
That's exactly.
There is no Google, there is no Facebook, there is nothing like that. And people sometimes want to allege that that's Netflix. I think I even referenced in that email, they were boasting at the time of having 10% of TV screen time. That is not a 75% monopoly-like market share of search or social. It is impossible for anyone to be draconian in the space, and that plus the authentication, plus the fact that so many opinions are shaped there, plus the fact that it's roughly half the TAM, you put all of that stuff together, and if we don't, and when I say we, I mean the open web. If the open web doesn't remain sort of the owner of that channel, there is no open web.
I agree. Yeah, it's a tough situation right now, and you've been a strong proponent of that pretty consistently. So I guess building along that line, you've introduced a slate of new capabilities and platforms. You announced Kokai, I think, on June 7th of last year. Also surprised me there.
Yeah,
thank you very much. But you're really helping the buy side access premium inventory more efficiently. Can you give us a look behind, what's in the pipeline, what's on your mind for the future and where we are today? Because I know there's some products out there that the marketplace is aware of, but maybe don't have a fulsome understanding of.
Yeah, so one of those that I think you're alluding to is the sellers and publishers 500 plus.
I couldn't remember the name, so I was dancing around it.
S&P 500 plus. And I think it's been fairly misunderstood. Partly we haven't talked about it at great length. But basically, when you talk about the open internet, people get really passionate about it, something that we have to protect, because it's there where all the premium content is. It's there where the premium content of CTV is. It's there where the premium content of audio is, which is where most of us spend the time consuming the content that we love. And then it's also where journalism is, which I suspect we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But often when you talk to a media buyer about buying the open internet, they then get afraid because there's thousands of sites and you don't know where it could run, which I find somewhat ironic because the places that you should be most afraid of are where there's lots of user-generated content. All the hate speech is in the comments section of basically every social media network in the world. So what we found it important to do is to bring together a collection of the best of the open internet. And we do that for two reasons. One, to make it really easy to pick a safe sort of consideration circle to buy your media in. And given that with just a few thousand and even a few hundred titles, you can get most of the traffic of the open internet. And then also it gives us a chance to market it. to help people recognize that when it's kind of ridiculous that there's exponentially more spend on YouTube when that's where the cat videos and the hate speech and all the questionable content that was shot by a cell phone is in contrast to all the premium content that we've been all so excited about today. So making certain that we can contrast that and really promote the very best of the open internet together is really what the Sellers and Publishers 500 Plus is, and make it easier for buyers to buy it.
Having been a client for 3.5 decades, I can tell you that platforms like the one you mentioned have quarterly business reviews directly with the clients. And they say, well, this is what you spent this quarter, and this is what you spent a year ago this quarter, and so you're up 12% and blah, blah. And I think a lot of what you've done is go, to the agencies where the money comes out of. But do you envision a future, I'm putting you on the spot on this one, where you're more client direct? Because I think that's a big way that those platforms have built their business.
Well, so I always want to be really careful, but also like deliberate in answering these questions, because I want to be clear that we have never been interested in disintermediating the agencies. I have always said, as the space grows, it is going to get more complicated. Everything we've talked about today underscores that point. It is getting more complicated. The need for agents and advisors is greater than it's ever been before. But you will see, when it comes to the deployment of first-party data, brands are, of course, going to be more involved. They're going to own that. But more and more agencies are going to make the decisions on buying, as they always have. Some will bring it in-house, and we're fine to work with them that way. Some will use agencies, and I think the most of them will. So it's important that we have a relationship with both agencies and with brands. But in the cases where the decisions are made by brands, and especially as it relates to the use of their data, which is really critical to the future of the open internet and to the future of journalism and television and audio, it's critical that we're working with them. But execution is going to continue to be important through the agencies, and our relationships there will forever matter.
I wish more CEOs in our industry who weren't on the sell side mentioned journalism as much as you have in the last 8 minutes. It's really refreshing to hear, and we'll get that. So I want to go back to another anecdote where you once again brought up the famous Jeff Green crystal ball. You famously said, 8 years ago, that Netflix would launch an ad service, and they just denied it and denied it and denied it and denied it. And then all of a sudden, I've got 3 really good friends working on the Netflix ad-supported business, right? And so why are ads so vitally important to the future of streaming versus subscription models?
So I've had this conversation with a lot of executives at various media companies who often start religious about avoiding ads. And it's because they want to have a pure experience for consumers, that they interact directly with them. Exactly. But
Darn. I know what that means.
But what I've always said to them is, I get what you're after, but you're describing a platform for rich people. There are 2 ways to pay for content. One is by giving a little bit more of your time, and the other is by giving more of your money. There is no way to support the premium nature of content, whether we're talking about CTV or audio, and especially in journalism, without us. Another one. He told me to give me $100 if I said it. Every time I say it.
Check is in the mail.
Yeah. So, but there is no way to get the subscribers that you want unless you are willing to let them pay either way. So I recognize that 8 years ago it was fine to raise the price by 50 cents or $1, but at some point to get 10%, that's going to be $3 or $5. And when you do that, you're really hurting the average American. And then I also looked at the fact that, and this is what really made it easy to be really aggressive, especially on Netflix, is Reed recognized that in order for him to continue the growth, he had to go outside the United States. Right. Well, the median household income in the United States at the time was $50,000 a year, and all the places he was looking at was lower than that. Yeah. And so it becomes increasingly important to do that. So in hindsight, it might have been bold just because they were saying the opposite, and I was willing to say that they were wrong publicly. But in terms of understanding the math, it wasn't that big of a prediction.
Growth is your friend until it isn't. And then if you've ever dealt with a grow over problem, which is shit, we grew too much last year and now we got to grow more this year to satisfy our investors, it's a problem. So since I can't keep you off the topic,
Okay.
let's talk about quality news journalism, Jeff, and the news media business behind it. It seems like every other day, some journalistically oriented platform is shutting down, dramatically reducing its footprint in the marketplace. My favorite story is about 8 or 9 years ago. Well, no, it was 7 or 8 years ago. Gannett bought the Salinas Morning Herald, I think it is, and eliminated the newsroom except for one individual. And the only person that still works in the newsroom there is the woman who answers the phone for obituaries. So the only sign of life in this 150-odd-year-old paper is death. And unfortunately, I think it's a bit of a metaphor for what we're seeing, particularly in local journalism. I know from our many, many conversations on this topic, and believe me, there's no better fan or advocate of journalism than the man on my right. You're very, very committed to preserving the fourth estate in this country. How do we get advertising to continue to support trusted news?
Well, one of the most important things is that we have to make it easier for the news to be discoverable. And I know, like, you work with Advantes, which we're proud to have partnered with them. They're one of many solutions, but we have to get more metadata on what they're buying because many brands are afraid of it. As we, in things like Sellers and Publishers 500 plus, as well as its accompanying Blue List.
Can you talk a little? I think we skirted over Sellers and Publishers 500 plus and the dynamics of it. And I think it's worth it to go one click deeper if you're willing.
Yeah. So often what people have historically bid factored on in our platform is supply vendor. That's one of the things they optimize to most, which I view as a tragedy. And most of you are not traders, but there are many traders that I've talked to in the last 6 months. We did what we called a world tour, where I met with 200 traders on 4 continents, so 800 traders outside of our company to talk about these concepts. And the analogy that I use is it's a bit like we as an industry created an Amazon.com where you tell us which way you'd like the UPS guy to drop off your package. Would you like UPS or FedEx? And when you go to Amazon, you don't weigh in. You don't give a shit what pipes or what truck your cell phone case comes in. You just want your cell phone case now, immediately, right now. Get it to me as fast as possible. I don't care which truck it takes. Amazon can deliver it, FedEx can deliver it, UPS can deliver it, USPS, okay, but you don't care. Supply vendor can be a bit like that, especially on the other side of QPS duplication and really complicated SPO. There's a whole bunch of really complicated things that go into that. And we have wrongly, I believe the trade desk made a mistake in exposing those capabilities. And what we should have instead been doing is making it easier to see the publishers. And when I say the publishers, that's different than the sellers. So think of the seller as Disney, the publisher as Hulu, ESPN, Disney Plus. It's the brand that the consumer is interacting with. And there is obviously a very different audience between Disney Plus and ESPN. So why would we optimize to seller, let alone supply vendor? Right. So we just need to make it easier for people to do that. And if we give metadata, especially on the ones that are related to journalism, then it becomes easier for people to avoid those that are too polarizing for them or not on the same camp as them or whatever, but so that you can make deliberate decisions around journalism. And let's give as much metadata as we possibly can, because it is critical to running democracies around the world. And we should all be, as global citizens, not even just those of us that are American citizens, which are likely nearly all of us. As global citizens, we should be concerned about the state of journalism. Like James Madison spent a lot of time writing about this in the Federalist Papers as they're creating a government. And how do we make it thrive but not be, too antagonistic? it was essential, what he called the fourth estate, essential to it all working. And I mean, I have goosebumps talking about this in this room, in this building, because I really do believe, and I think it's really important to say this, and I don't believe I'm overstating it. CTV can save journalism, period. And I would even go so far as to say it may be the only hope. And the reason for that is because CTV has a large amount of authentication. As cookies go away and the identity tug of war, it is not in the best interest of walled gardens to try to preserve it or save it. They just can't be blamed for killing it. That's it. That's all they're trying to avoid, is avoid being blamed for killing it. And so there is an opportunity for the rest of us to do it, and it doesn't cost us much of anything.
There's business value to it. I mean, first of all, to your point about James Madison and the Fourth Estate, as you well know, journalism is the only profession called out in the Constitution of the United States, the only one. And it's because of its unique role in keeping our government accountable to the people, right? And just a quick stat for those of you who don't know this, in a 15-year period ending in March of 2020, so right when the pandemic hit, there's been an 80% decline in advertising support of journalism in the United States. 80%. Most industries that go through something like that radically transform. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's resulted in a 50% decline in the number of people working in newsrooms in the United States. And if you think about news in the last 20 years, it's gotten more complicated, it's gotten more nuanced, it's much harder to get to the truth. And there's frankly a war on truth that, we've seen going back to Kellyanne Conway standing on the White House lawn at the beginning of the previous president's administration, where she said, the president was using alternative facts. And like an idiot, I went and looked up in a search engine that I won't mention here, what are alternative facts? And I thought that was a real thing. And now it has become. And for those who have
And how were the Bing results? Were they good?
The Bing results, they were amazing. They came in a minute and a half, and
They came in a minute.
Yeah, they were phenomenal. And they rendered shortly thereafter. But look, we in this room who are on the buy side, and I spent my entire career on the buy side, are creating this problem. We're not advertising in news because we're concerned about getting caught up in the culture wars and have our brand become associated with some adjacency that comes out of the UGC environment, where this whole brand safety and suitability thing started with the idea that I don't want my ad running next to an ISIS beheading. And that was it. I mean, I was in the ANA board meeting when we talked about that specific issue. And now it's like we need to avoid news because any news could reflect badly on us. And there's no evidence of that. What we do know about news, and now you're interviewing me, sorry. What we do know about news, it is the highest unduplicated reach of any vertical. And if you've ever made a campaign in this market, which I've done a few, the number one driver of business outcomes is unduplicated reach. Find new people. Well, with an 80% decline in advertising and news, trust me, there's a lot of unduplicated reach there. But think about who reads news. Think about your family and who's the news junkie. There's one in every family. They're probably on the very high end of affluence. They probably are more likely to own an iPhone. They've probably gone on vacations abroad each of the last 5 years. We've proven this at Adfontes Media. We have the research. We have the receipts. Bottom line, people who buy your stuff and will drive growth, if you're a client, are virtually untapped in news. And so if there's pressure to, actually drive growth, buy news. And you've made that easier with S&P 500. Are you still here? Sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize. It's Jeff, right? Yeah. Great to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Really like the hair. No, I mean, this is important. And I don't get as many opportunities to meet with a CEO who's ardently and passionately committed to this. And I think you should hear it from him. He's not talking about the incremental profitability of the trade desk about news. I don't even know if there is any. But there's a much deeper thing that involves your kids, the future of our democracy, and a free society that we've grown up with, which is pretty fucking good. So, sorry for the F-bomb.
No,
I don't know. Is there a question in there that you'd like to answer? Because I don't know.
I just honestly just want to say amen. And I just want to, I want to connect the dots that you may hear that and say, what can I do? And all the things we've talked about. And I specifically talked about Netflix 8 years ago, but I've been pretty vocal about saying CTV and retail are the last hopes of the open internet. And I do believe, or said another way, it is CTV and retail that will bring down the walls of walled gardens. And I think we've really highlighted that today.
Yeah.
The amazing case studies that we've talked about between like Paramount and Unilever, or just really every single person on stage has talked about the synergies between those two things.
Yeah, and I think it's worth getting one click granular on that. You skipped ahead about 4 questions, but that's fine.
Sorry about that.
Well, I went on a soliloquy, so I deserve it. There's an obvious symbiosis between the logged-in, pristine, first-party RMN environment that's down funnel and the logged-in, pristine environment about the upper funnel CTV capability, right? It is finally the ability to plan a journey between upper funnel stimuli and lower funnel outcomes. And you're in the middle of a lot of partnerships. Obviously, you power the Walmart Connect business with your software. Do you see from a buy side, the holy grail is let me take them on the full funnel and show every step of the way. The symbiosis is screaming at me. Are the RMNs going to get to the point where they're like going to the market directly with the CTV networks? Or is that something that you facilitate in the middle? To me, this is a very exciting future that you can model off of and start to really prove your attribution solution.
Yeah, so I'm actually glad you're asking about this, because it's not a case where you want to create hundreds or even thousands of unique, isolated retail networks. Again, I know...
The balkanization of balkanizations.
It's because of the math, again. Because what I spent that world tour talking about, and I know the last time you and I were in front of a whiteboard, I've been kind of obsessed with drawing consideration circles and what you target, and understanding the significance of 15 million QPS, which includes some amount of duplication. But understanding
Does everybody know what QPS is? Just can I?
Oh, okay, sorry. 15 million QPS means 15 million queries per second, which is ridiculous programmatic 3-letter acronyms for 15 million ad impression opportunities every single second. So when you have 15 million opportunities every single second, sometimes what can happen is a retailer can say, oh, I can combine my data with this inventory and we can have 2,000. And comparing 2,000 to 15 million, where you have lots of choice and you can run into your specific users in this very big universe. Reminds me of that line in the movie Armageddon when he's like, how can we see the asteroid coming? He's like, with all due respect, Mr. President, it's a big-ass sky. That is the issue.
Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah. That is the issue with the significance of the internet is it's really big. So what we're often encouraging the retailers to do is to think of it the way that Amazon thinks about it, which is you want to spin your flywheel. It's not about making another $10 million by leveraging your data to get them to buy your media on your data. It is about making your data available for measurement on 100% of what a Unilever or a P&G buy, because they're spending billions of dollars. You want them to optimize all $8 billion to buying or to selling products in a Walmart or a Target, rather than saying, how could one of those companies make another 10 million bucks this year? If you get them optimizing to selling the product that way, that's where the flywheel really spins. And that's where we all have a huge breakthrough, and the open internet gets the first dollar instead of the last dollar or the second dollar. And that's where we're all heading because of exactly what you're describing. Because at the top of the funnel, you can create allegiances. And I have often argued that search is not really advertising because it's where it's really navigation. I'm not saying it's not valuable, but if advertising is by definition the process of winning hearts and minds, especially through emotion, that's done in video and audio.
There's no serendipity in search.
Exactly.
You're already there.
You're already there. I typed in buy iPhone. That's because of the commercial that I saw. That's because of the advertising that was already done. So connecting the advertising that was already done to the stuff that was actually bought. We can do that at greater scale now than we ever have before. And that enables a degree of measurement that has never been possible before. And that is going to fund and fuel and perpetuate a better economy than what we've had, which is more diverse.
Agreed.
Like what we've all been after is creating a more competitive economy. And incidentally, that's exactly what we're doing when we talk about the marketplace of ideas in journalism, which if you read our S1, the first paragraph of the business section talks about the marketplace of ideas. We are not changing what we're doing. We're not changing what we're talking about. We are talking about making a better global economy perpetuated by all the people in this room. And I suspect none of us really know the significance of what we're doing right now.
Well, I think to an extent we understand that we power the open web, and if we retreat from it, we let it collapse with all sorts of bad outcomes. But you're very assiduous about making sure you describe CTV as part of the open web. And I think that's true. But for the traditional open web publishers, some of whom we've heard from today, how do they compete with this very pristine, very well-lit environment where identity is a true currency and you know, they have a traditional publishing model. They are under assault that model is under assault from the deprecation of cookies, which I think is a net good thing for our industry, by the way. I'm sure there's a few people here who'd like to debate that. But like the rest of the open web now needs to compete with this symbiosis between CTV and RMNs and everything else, and they may or may not get there without a rethink.
I'm confident that most of them will get there. And the only ones that won't are those that take the bury their head in the sand approach, which unfortunately, many of those have been in journalism. But for everyone else, there will be products like OpenPass. If you don't know what OpenPass is, we've launched an SSO for the open internet. That SSO is meant to be more publisher friendly than any other SSO.
Does everybody know what an SSO is?
Oh, damn it.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad
you're a TLA factory.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
a TLA is?
Yeah, three-letter acronym.
Yeah, okay.
In programmatic, we're just so in love with them all. SSO is single sign-on. So when you go to a website, you'll often see, would you like to log in with the New York Times login, or would you like to log in with Google or Apple or Facebook? Well, one that you'll see among them is now OpenPass. And OpenPass being more friendly to the open internet, and especially to the publishers of the open internet, we found a way to create a Shopify-like experience. So if you go to Shopify, the first time you go into Shopify, it doesn't feel any different. You're checking out of an e-commerce site. It says Shopify there, and you're like, okay. And you fill it out, and I don't know why they had Shopify, but okay. But then the second time you go there, and you're like, oh my God. And if you're like me and you think about the security and how did they do that, you immediately start retracing. I'm like, oh my God, it's more secure and faster. Like, to me, that is exactly what an SSO needs, or what the open internet SSO needs. And that's what OpenPass is. So if you've read anything on The Current, which is one of the things that we put out into the ecosystem to talk about issues facing our industry, you've logged on with OpenPass. But you'll see that around the entire internet throughout this year.
And relogged on every time you read it, but that's another story. You guys are a little, you got to re-enter it every freaking
Well, you're changing devices. You only have to do it once per device, per user. But if you're on different devices, you'll have to do it once per device. But that's not per site. So it's once per device, per user. And then if you go to another site that has OpenPass, you don't have to do it again. It's just like the Shopify experience. You click it again. So you will see... you'll see hundreds, thousands adopt that in 2024 is my prediction.
By the way, if you're not familiar with The Current, anyone in this room can submit an article for their consideration, and you get great engagement. I put 2 up there, and I really am amazed at how much feedback. You guys have really kind of set the bar for that, and that's B2B. That's us, the industry. So I have 2 questions in 5 minutes and 45 seconds. The first one is going to be like that moment in Jaws where they first throw the chum in the water and the shark comes out. Watch this.
Well, I don't think I know where this one's going.
I hope not. How does CTV grab more share from walled gardens, from UGC platforms such as YouTube, for example? They seem to be maniacally focused on shifting dollars from linear, but I think their endless shelf of dubious content is headwind for that particular approach.
Yeah. So I do view it as, in a way, at the risk of sounding like I'm being hard on all of us, our collective failure that YouTube has exponentially more spend than the premium content of CTV.
And produce very little, if any, premium content.
Exactly. So to me, that's partly because the supply chain is really simple. The onboarding is really simple in platforms like Facebook and Google. I mean, let's give them credit for making it easy to spend on those platforms.
Yeah, it's addictive.
The open internet that is trying to fund the premium content have to get better at making it easy and also recognizing where the value is. And especially the advertisers that we represent that fund all of this, the value for them, the process of winning hearts and minds is on that premium content. So I just view it as we have work to do. There's 100 tactics that we have to deploy to make that happen. It represents just massive increases to our TAM and that better economy that we described. But it's all on track. We all just have to keep doing it. And maybe the most important message around this is, and I've actually never really understood this. Like, I don't understand.
Breaking news right here. Jeff Green admits to not understanding. Ronan, where are you? You got your recorder?
I don't understand why our industry has been fighting against each other so much for so long. Some of the most important things that I've done have been with other DSPs. And yet, so many of them have been focused on competing with each other instead of competing with the walled gardens and recognizing that it's really just two different ideologies about what the future of the world should look like.
Yeah, but I think unfortunately a lot of it is David versus wanting to be in a David versus Goliath thing, which drives that. But
I think you're right.
Yeah.
But
it is unfortunate.
But for me, I don't understand why people would focus on that because all the TAM's in the other box.
We were talking about this just in the green room beforehand, and you know, in my experience, transparency always wins ultimately, whether you're talking about business or society or culture. So the world will come to those who are transparent.
Yeah, just time.
All right, so in the last 2 minutes and 41 seconds, and feel free to go over because it's your show and you're paying the bill. You know, we're what are we, 58 days into the new year. And, you know, it's amazing how fast it's moved. What are you most looking forward to this year? What's got you really excited? And whether it's in the industry or, you know, travel or whatever it might be, tell us what's on the mind of Jeff Green that's got you getting out of bed in the morning all jazzed. Yeah,
so when we talk about a tipping point, it's a tipping point not just for TV. It's a tipping point for the open internet. I feel more pressure than I ever have before, and it's not because of Wall Street expectations or anything like that. I don't.
They seem to like your last quarter, man.
But to me, the future of our company and the future of the open internet is determined by us thinking much longer than that, and by making certain that the open internet thrives. And there are so many things we're working on. I imagine most of you in this room feel this way too. Like, I don't know that there's ever been a year that feels busier professionally. The number of things we have to work on is just off the charts. But the significance of the battle, especially over identity, and the fact that that happens in the middle of an election year, the fact that we're rolling out Kokai to all of our clients, like, well, we announced it and we've rolled out specific parts of it, the change in workflows that really have a huge impact on the way that people target audience and the way that we move from supply vendor to sellers and especially to publishers is a huge move in the way that we all buy media that will have a big impact on the open internet. And I don't want to drop the ball at all because I do believe that this is our big opportunity. When I say ours, I mean the collective ours. I think the same with retail media. I think there's a lot of moves that are happening in retail, and getting that right and navigating all of those companies becomes really important. I believe journalism, I don't know that there will ever be a time that there's more at stake for journalism than right now. And the fact that we have to figure out how to monetize before, I mean, if you read the number of headlines of them going out of business, we do not have a ton of time. But I am also concerned about preparing for the scale on the other side of getting this right, because I believe we're all going to get it right. It's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. We got a lot of shit to do, but we're going to get through it. And then on the other side of that, it's a tidal wave of opportunity. Because the one thing that I've seen private equity do wrong is when they model the decline of linear television, it's a straight line. Nothing dies that way. No industry dies that way. What happens is it goes like this, and then it falls off a cliff. And when we get past that tipping point, it will fall off a cliff. And so it becomes really important that all of us are thinking digital first. And I know there are some in this room that own media that is both on linear and both in digital, but all the more reason for us to get our digital shit together. And so this is a really big year for all of those initiatives. And TV is the right? This year is the tipping point for TV, but TV is the tipping point for the rest of the open internet. So exciting year. Will not be boring.
It's incredibly refreshing to hear that. I think to sum it up, if we lose the open web, if we lose quality news journalism, it won't come back. And it won't come back in your children's lifetime. And it's an investment that matters in terms of your business, but also in terms of your values and the principles of the clients you represent or the brands that you are here today representing. And so it's incredibly refreshing, Jeff, to hear your thoughts on this. You're playing at a different level. I think the rest of the industry is playing chess, and you're playing three-dimensional chess here. And I think I speak for everybody in the room that we're grateful for your leadership when it comes to preserving the open web and news, and thank you for bringing us together today.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Thanks, man.
Thanks, brother.
Really appreciate it.